Throughout the years, there's been words of wisdom and insight readily available to the majority of the population, yet there are still stupid people today. Hey, I'm Justin Hitt with Inside Strategic Relations. Are you someone who is doing well and understanding what creates success? There are questionable ethics out there that gives advantages in a modern system, but there's also wisdom and insight from the ages that consistently works no matter what the times are like. Why is this? Well, first off, we have to understand that there are political and corporate forces hiding the truth. Now, political is just a label, but it's a pretty universal label. Political tends to describe individuals who are in power and want to maintain power, and so very often they will position themselves in such a way to either deliver false information or to use hidden wisdom for their advantage while not attributing it to their success. So when you ask somebody, hey, how did you become successful? They'll usually say, well, it was just luck. Now, it could have been luck, but it also could have been understanding how the world works and how human behavior functions. Now, think about this. What if there are insights out there that reduce your long-term liability, that increase your ability to gain access to resources, and ultimately positions you as a go-to expert when it comes to other people's money? So if you are a valuable services provider and other people come to you for solutions, they're willing to pay market rate. If all you do is provide a commodity product, they'll only pay what the commodity is worth. In fact, they may pay less because competitors will come out in the marketplace. Now, very often in the newsletter, we encourage you to be a unique individual, even if it seems difficult for you. Again, the uniqueness of who you are is hard to knock off. So if you are that guy, Matthew Lesko, that wears the jacket with the question marks all over it, other people will have an opinion about that, a strong opinion about that, and they will not try to duplicate what he is doing. Now, again, that works because his business is about inquiry and compiling of information. And so it's an attention grabber. He's serving a general public audience, but the image is well cultivated for the purpose of his both personality and his actual purpose. He's not hurting anybody dressed like that. But again, the world acts kind of weird. Just this whole cancel culture today would not accept that type of behavior because it would have been, he's culturally appropriating the Riddler or something. I don't know. But the point of it is that there are hidden wisdoms and behaviors in humans, an unconscious bias that exists to serve good over evil. Now, there's also the unconscious bias to support those that have ready, immediate gratification versus long-term gratification. So good tends to take a little time to progress, build, and retain, where evil tends to be like just snatch and grab. So we have to understand that there are certain cultural and environmental conditioning that is happening that could cause a society to move towards one or the other. So, for example, there are behaviors which allow slavery to function, to work. And we're talking about this in a report that's coming up here soon, is that you can actually be enslaved by your conveniences or enslave others by those things you feel that you're entitled to receive. So there's a lot of talk today about electric vehicles and how someone who buys an electric vehicle is literally saving the world. But is that true? Well, the batteries from the electric vehicles comes from slave labor. There's children in mines finding those rare earth metals. There's people dying in those mines to find those rare earth metals and the lithium and stuff that takes to make the batteries of the electric vehicle. So by buying an electric vehicle or anything with a lithium battery, in fact, you're supporting slavery because that is the primary way in which those things are mined. Now, is it slavery in the minds of the individuals who are doing it? For many, it is. It's the only choice they have because of economic situations and modifications in their environment due to large corporations that want to benefit from this. Why wouldn't the corporations just bring in safe mining equipment and hire these individuals to go do the mining? Well, because, again, you have to find these veins of lithium. Sometimes it's easier just to send people out as prospectors rather than to go out and do all the surveys that are necessary. So there's a time-saving element. So people in the so-called modern world demanding for cheap goods and services, demanding for certain products are in fact supporting child labor, forced labor, and other factors. You can find it in the coffee industry. You can find it in the cheap clothing industries. You can find it in synthetics and practices. There are forever chemicals being released into environments because of these demands for cheap and easy, for these demands for instant gratification. Now, we know from the good old marshmallow experiment that children who can delay gratification tend to be more successful in life. They get better results. They have more stable lives. Children who can't resist temptation of 2 marshmallows or 1 marshmallow, they seek that instant gratification, tend to get into trouble. They tend to have interactions with law enforcement, other factors. We have to understand these things exist and then overcome them in our own life and in the lives of our family by creating an environment that rewards the righteous, that rewards the sustainable solution, that rewards good quality products. There's a biblical statement that you will be known by the fruits of your labors, that shows people that it's okay to work with your hands and to work in a trade job. You can make just as much money in many trades than you can in many white-collar office jobs. Sometimes it's healthier, sometimes it's not, but there are many white-collar jobs that might be in a safer work environment, but they're not mentally healthy. They're not physically healthy. So we want to make sure that we're walking the path that is appropriate for your mindset and that we're not cutting any corners by maintaining an ethical standard about our approach. Now, the reason I advocate the ethical standard, not some relative ethical standard, but one that could be judged across the ages as being good, is because what I've seen in my clients and what I've seen in success, just having the influence and power, is that influence and power that are achieved by nefarious means is dangerous. If you're a drug dealer and selling those drugs is illegal, that you have the full force of a government, their tax dollars, their willingness to waste money to come after you. Plus you have the jealousy of other individuals, and then because you're already breaking one law, a lot of people break other laws. And so now you can put yourself at unnecessary risk. The wisdom that comes from those who study what works and what doesn't in a marketplace, what behaviors are serving them and which ones are not, are going to have the advantage of adopting even ancient wisdom, applying it today, and getting sustainable and consistent results. There have been leaders in the past who have done good things. Now, you can't throw out the baby with the bathwater, because what we judge to be good at the time of action versus today in retrospect are two different things. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, they owned slaves. And in today's context, we would not own slaves. But what if owning the slave was the culturally appropriate thing to do, and that the treatment of slaves meant more than the actual ownership? See, in my own history, I do a lot of genealogy. My family members did own slaves. We would buy whole family members. Okay, now this is not me. I say we as in a family lineage, but there are hundreds of thousands of ancestors. In any person's history, you'll find somebody who owned slaves. But I do know from diaries and family lore is that the reason they bought whole families was to prevent the family from getting broken up. The College of William and Mary, the College of Washington Lee, there are many colleges who in practice owned slaves by inheritance, leased those slaves out, and then paid those slaves wages. So yes, slaves built many of the colleges around the United States, but many were secretly compensated for it or otherwise paid as skilled tradespersons. Now, the concept of slavery is bad. We know that. Yet today in modern society, because folks are looking at the past and damning the past, which is gone, by the way. Your past is behind you. You can only learn lessons from it. But because folks are so intense on tearing down things and destroying things and erasing history, they ignore the fact that slave labor happens today. Child labor happens today. Sex trafficking happens today. There are conditions that are causing detrimental impact to humans and the environment today. yet they're so worried about the past. Now, that's a projection. That's in the concepts of mass control and modifying society. That is focusing their attention at they say, don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain. Focus on the show, and that's something we can address in another way. But again, there are things throughout history, wisdom throughout history, that can serve you today so that you're not contributing to the negatives of society, but instead driving forward more important and valuable outcomes. Be a collector of wisdom. Catalog and use knowledge to improve your situation. Catalog is very important. What best practices do you have in your business? Once you get them down on paper, you can evaluate them. You can determine if they're serving you or not serving you, if they're actually part of the solution or part of a problem. But again, to improve your situation and to improve the situation of others, cataloging wisdom, being willing to build society rather than to tear it down, puts you in a position of the builders, puts you in the position of the producers. Rather than mindlessly consuming, you're applying resources for good and beneficial outcomes. Now, is this always profitable? No, it's not always profitable, but it does give you a better feeling and control over about what you're doing. It does position you so it's harder to take you down, and then ultimately you do have ultimate control. You'll tend to build a better loyal circle of people because you can be trusted. What are some questions you can ask to make sure that you're leveraging wisdom and that you're using the insights that are readily available in classic books, in biographies, and in your own meditation on the successes of others? Not a meditation for comparison, but a meditation for adaptation and appropriation. Now again, the whole cultural appropriation is silly, but if another culture has better hygiene practices and better graduation rates and better success rates, why not borrow what works and use it in your own culture? Culture is constantly being adapted to environments, to social conditions, and to what is acceptable in society. Thomas Jefferson, George Washington owned slaves. It was acceptable in their society. It was no different than a large corporation today hiring people and underpaying them. Or even worse, setting up an environment where people will work for free and then become dependent on that work and basically be stuck in their own home. So the new article that we're working on, the report we're putting together, has to do how many elites will not, they'll say slavery is bad, but they'll have behavior that creates slaves in the native country of the slaves. So rather than going to Africa and taking slaves from Africa and taking them to the United States or Europe, they instead keep the slaves in Africa and make them serve that way. Now, again, Africa is just one example. Southeast Asia, the way outsourcing has been handled in the United States, there are also people in the United States that are very often, with the whole open borders the open borders concept, enslaved in a country where they're not legal, where they're always constantly under the risk of deportation. These are things we must look at. So what are the questions to ask? Number one, what was the 100-year ago thing that is still appropriate today? So what was true 100 years ago that's still true today? Write it down. How was the same problem solved before? So you have a problem in your life. How have other people solved the problem? How have people smarter than you solved the problem? How have people solved the problem that didn't really solve the problem? What mistakes can you learn from? Next, what human behaviors contribute to problems or outcomes? Very often the problems we face are not due to someone out there. They're due to our perceptions. They're due to how we address the situation. And you can sometimes just stop doing the things that create the problem, and the problem will just go away. Next, what was the problem solved for before? What tools exist? So again, you identify the problem, you cultivate the root cause, and now we're going to work on corrective actions. What tools were used to solve this problem in the past? We assess these tools, we borrow what works, we drop what doesn't. Finally, does this problem even need to be solved at all? See, a lot of folks are focusing on problems that are historical in nature. They say they're institutionalized, and then they call on the institution itself to fix the problem. Well, couldn't they just create new institutions? All of the Ivy League colleges in the United States were founded by people without college degrees. Think about that. The founders of these universities curated information from other people to create a university system that now may or may not be corrupt, may or may not be serving the interests of the students. You have to assess and ask the questions necessary to make this determination, and then act accordingly in your own life. Because you can create parallel economies, you can create different institutions, you can support the institutions that are moving towards your outcome and objective, but you can also understand whether your outcome objective is even valid and useful. The wisdom of ages will show you and remove the veil of discontent, and remove the veil of propaganda, and remove the veil of fake news and narratives to show you what's really going on in this world. Now, once you know what's going on in this world, you can better cultivate your local environment. You can better cultivate your own thinking. You can set clearer and more achievable goals, and you can move forward with the influence and power that others gain easily because they understand the world as it is rather than they want it to be. Bad times are coming. History shows us that. Yet good times will follow. With the wisdom of bad times, the bad times can be shorter. But the wisdom of good times can make those good times last longer. Wisdom and knowledge waits for you, and very often it hides in places you wouldn't expect it. So what I'm sharing with you here starts with self-reflection. It starts with being coachable. It starts with observing rather than judgment. It's challenging your own opinions and the way you look at the world, understanding that it is entirely possible for you to see the world differently that the majority would think is wrong. And that's okay. Because again, the majority is very often following the leader. The majority is very often programmed to function in certain ways. That culture is programming. And so you can start having choice in life. You can leave the culture that is negative, you can leave the bad habits, and you can move towards the outcomes you're looking for. What you'll find yourself is moving towards healthier foods, fairer ways of doing business, individual agreements, for example, versus imposing through a governmental force or third party some kind of way of doing business. You'll start moving towards natural fibers and then appropriate use of synthetic fibers. You'll be looking at free markets that help you create a more sustainable future. The biggest benefit comes from accurate thinking, seeing the world as it is. Very often you'll see the shortcuts that are already there that don't have the short-term gratification necessarily. They may be seen as maverick or unusual approaches to doing business, yet over time produces the outcomes and results that you desire. The righteousness of a person doing what is best for yourself and others does not have an obvious advantage. When you add to that ethic, when you add to that relationships, when you add to that appropriate use of power, you very often can position yourself in such a way that the evils of this world cannot take you down. That you're standing forward in the approach of whether you call it God, whether you call it the habit force, whatever you attribute to that righteousness, to that good ethic, to that beneficial behavior. You might not be the richest person there is, but you may have wealth beyond comparison when it comes to the things that money can't buy. You might also have the ability to do things to impact change and to create results that others did not think was possible, and that gives you unique and strategic value in a marketplace, unique and strategic advantage. Yes, there'll always be haters, and when you start seeing the world the way it is, you'll understand why that's the case, why social pressures are the way they are. But ultimately, you'll get the results that you're looking for. You'll get faster and clearer forward momentum. You'll be able to overcome the disasters that are here and will come in the future. And you'll understand the cyclical cycle of nature and as things move from one polar opposite to another. This gives you an advantage that cannot be taken away. You can lose everything you have. You can lose your freedom. And this mindset helps you recover quickly. Are you willing to do the retrospection, the investigation, the curation that is necessary to build on ancient wisdoms and knowledge that cannot be taken away, on processes that work in multiple cultures, in approaches and understanding of the world that gives you a clearer vision of what's really going on and how you can address it? Now all this stuff sounds controversial and conspiracy, and it's going to be criticized, but try it. Try it for 30 days. Take notes, journal, think about what you're seeing in the world, think about what you're doing in the world, think about your impact on yourself and others, and you will find the secret is that the world is not as it's been presented to us. The world is not as we see it through our eyes. The world is more positive than you can imagine, and the outcome and opportunities are bigger than is being professed. I'm just going to leave it there. I'm Justin Hitt with Inside Strategic Relations, and we've been talking about borrowing from the wisdom of the ages, understanding cultural changes in how people have solved problems in the past to ultimately reduce your long-term liability, to gain more control over your life and the world around you, and ultimately have the prosperity that you desire, the personal liberties that you desire, the relationships that help you get results. I'm here to help you transform business relationships into profits, and those profits are far beyond monetary. Those profits are influence, power, control, the things that many people desire, but they will take those shortcuts to gain. Wisdom is yours to have. It's not hiding anywhere. It just takes a little bit of effort to find it. If you want to explore the wisdom that you have and build on the successes that you desire, we have coaching programs available, we have consulting services, and we have the analyst reports that I've talked about from time to time. If you're ready to take the step forward to get on the track of your success, to gain more control and influence over at least your own life and community, then you start by visiting www.insidestrategicrelations.com. Articulate and tell me what you need. Just go to the contact page, fill out the little form, tell me what you need. And if we can help you, we'll always be in touch with you and answer questions if possible, share podcasts that maybe you didn't know existed, but ultimately we'll get you on the right track. We'll help you get to where you need to be. There's also a free newsletter there and other resources. I hope to hear from you soon. And here's to your success. Here's to seeing things as they are. Here's to the influence that you have inside you. I'll see you in the next podcast. I'm Justin Hitt from Inside Strategic Relations.